Welcome back, everyone, to the deep dive. It really is great to be back. We know it's been a couple of weeks, things got a bit hectic, moving offices and all that. But the good news is we're all settled in, the new setup is great, and we are absolutely back on track and ready to dive deep into some, well, really fascinating stories coming out of Spain recently. Our mission today, like always, is to cut through all that noise, pull out the crucial bits from a whole stack of recent sources, and hopefully hand you the surprising facts, the actionable insights, so you feel truly well-informed.
Absolutely. And we definitely have a lot to get through today, things that really paint a clearer picture of what's happening in Spain right now. We're going to look at three main areas. First up, there's this really complex 7-year investigation. It's about alleged legislative influence, involves a former finance minister. Pretty big stuff. Then we'll switch gears to something very immediate, the challenges Spain's facing with these widespread wildfires. It's critical, ongoing. And finally, something maybe a bit unexpected, a really interesting surge in the Spanish mortgage market. And like you said, these aren't just quick headlines. There are intricate details, broader implications we really want to unpack for you.
Okay, let's start with that first one then. We're diving deep into, well, the shadows of Spanish politics, you could say. It's this 7-year saga, honestly. It reads like a political thriller. And it centers on the man who, once held the nation's purse strings, the former finance minister, Cristóbal Montoro. It is genuinely a complex investigation, but the core question it throws up is, well, it's profound, really. What actually happens when that line between private interest and public policy gets blurry?
Well, according to the reporting, particularly from RTVE and the judge's findings, the whole thing seems to pivot on one single email. An email they found back in 2017. It was between two senior execs at a gas company, Messer Iberica, Ruben Folgado and Carl Hochdock. And what were they talking about? Basically, how to directly influence the Congress of Deputies, the Spanish parliament, to get a law changed for some pretty big tax benefits.
And the really shocking part is this direct quote from that email. It's dated December 5th, 2013. It says, "La vía más directa, como siempre, es pagar a este equipo económico que tiene contacto directo con el ministro de Hacienda, Cristóbal Montoro." Now, for anyone not up on their Spanish, that translates roughly to two-fat. The most direct way, as always, is to pay this economic team that has direct contact with the Minister of Finance, Cristóbal Montoro. And the judge looking at this, interpreted that phrase, especially the "as always" part, suggested paying equipo económico Montoro's firm, well, it could have been something habitual and known. That, as always, is pretty telling, isn't it?
It really is. And understanding equipo económico is absolutely critical here. Montoro himself founded it, that's confirmed. And other high-ranking officials from the ministry were explicitly linked to it, too. Reports from the Mossos d'Esquadra, that's the Catalan police force, they alleged the firm had this great capacity to basically connect companies straight to the Ministry of Hacienda. And not just connect, but exert influence over the whole legislative process. They even suggested it led to patronals, these powerful industry associations actively participating and actually drafting laws.
Well, okay. So if the firm allegedly had that kind of sway, how did it work in practice? Do we have concrete examples of this legislative molding?
Yeah, absolutely. There's one really compelling example that involves the Association of Manufacturers of Industrial and Medicinal Gases, AFGIM. They were lobbying hard for an 85% reduction on their electricity tax. And the sources indicate that the legislative text they proposed, well, it was, quote, completely adapted to their needs. Just think about that for a second. A private industry group allegedly writing legislation specifically for their own benefit and then seeing that text become public law.
That is quite a claim. Was there another big instance where this supposed influence showed up?
Yes, definitely. Another key example popped up with the reduction of the tax on economic activities, the IAE, in the 2018 general budgets. Now, initially, the guy in charge, Oscar Lamo Galan, the subdirector general of local taxes, he actually resisted this reform. He pushed back. But after Montoro appointed Alberto Garcia Varela, who had links to the consulting firm EY as the director of Tributos in 2016, well, things changed. The Lamo Galan apparently restarted contacts with the gas patronal. And what's more, he then accepted AFGIM's own draft of the reform, knowing full well their members would benefit. And just adding another layer here, Rogelio Menendez, an advisor to the minister who was actually at a meeting between Montoro and this gas patronal, he was recently fired by Hacienda. The sequence of events, it paints a very specific picture.
So, broadening this out a bit, the judge overseeing this, Ruben Rusvela from the court in Tarragona, he describes Equipo Económico as a company that, and I'm quoting here, mediating price, would dedicate itself to intervening in the legislative process, molding legal reforms to the needs of its clients.
that was. That's a very specific and frankly damning description of what they were allegedly up to.
It is, and it naturally leads to the question, was this just about the gas sector or was it wider? The UCO, that's the Central Operative Unit of the Civil Guard, they actually warned this could have happened with other companies of different sectors. They even mentioned names like Madrid Network, Ferrovial, Bengoa, though it's fair to say these came from an anonymous complaint that was later archived. But still, the investigating judge also noted this temporal coincidence. Basically, new laws appearing with tax breaks for the electrical and renewable energy sectors, right around the same time as payments were made by companies in those sectors to Estudios Económicos.
Right. So after 7 years, 18 volumes of investigation. What's the big takeaway? What are we really looking at here?
Well, the really striking thing after all this time isn't just, one alleged crime. It's the incredibly detailed picture that emerges. A picture of a sophisticated, almost, you could say, menu-driven system where private companies allegedly paid to have public laws crafted just for them. The shock isn't just if it happened, but the sheer apparent brazenness. Phrases like paying this economic team and a firm molding legal reforms. I mean, the anti-corruption prosecutor's office, they've identified a whole range of possible crimes, 12 of them. Everything from prevarication, fraud against the public administration, influence peddling, illicit negotiations, embezzlement, money laundering, business corruption, even belonging to a criminal organization. It really highlights a deep potential vulnerability in how democratic laws get made, laid bare in a way you rarely see.
Okay, quite a story. And speaking of major challenges, Spain's facing a very different, much more visible battle right now. These devastating wildfires that are sweeping across parts of the country. It's become a critical and sadly ongoing national issue.
That's right. As of when our sources were reporting, 2 new significant fires, level 2 fires, had been declared. One in Ibi in Alicante and another in Navaluenga in Avila. There is some slightly better news. A separate big fire in Mentrida, Toledo, that burned, I think, over 3,200 hectares. That one's now under control. But yeah, it just underscores the scale of the problem they're facing.
Let's zoom in on that EB fire in Alicante first. It started near the Font Rocha Natural Park, which is famous locally, right? A real green lung for the area. And the initial efforts, understandably, were all about protecting that park. But sadly, the reports say the flames have now reached it.
Yes, it started in the San Pascual area, affecting both Ibi and Alcoa municipalities. And it's already burned over 250 hectares, though that's a provisional figure. It could rise.
And the response?
It must be huge. Oh, absolutely massive. We're talking over 200 people on the ground. That includes 60 soldiers from the UME, the Military Emergency Unit. Plus, you've got the Generalitat Valenciana's force brigades, multiple firefighter units from both Alicante and Valencia provinces. But the conditions they're working in are just incredibly tough. Warm winds hitting 40 kilometers per hour, temperatures up near 37 Celsius, and crucially, extremely low humidity down at 11%. That combination just makes getting control incredibly difficult.
You can imagine. And the impact on nearby areas. Intense smoke, reports of an orange sky in nearby towns. They've done some precautionary evacuations too.
Yeah.
And advised residents nearby to stay inside, keep windows shut. Apparently, the fire initially broke out near a religious community residence, El Cenáculo. Cause is still being looked into.
Exactly. And it's important to stress the entire Valencian community is currently under extreme risk for forest fires over the next few days because of these conditions. What's really sobering about this is how these massive fires are becoming this tragic, almost annual staple. It's forcing Spain to pour resources not just into fighting them, but into completely rethinking land management, forestry, everything really, in the face of climate change.
Yeah, huge challenge. And the other big one, in Navaluenga, Avila.
Right, that one's in a natural spot called La Chinita. It also hit that level 2 potential severity index, which basically means it poses a serious threat to people or property, triggering significant public safety measures. As a precaution, they evacuated about 20 homes in an area called the El Cajigo urbanization.
Okay, and the response effort there, similar scale?
Also very significant. Over 50 units involved, both air and ground support, including the UME again, this time deployed from Torrejón de Ardoz near Madrid. The mayor of Navaluenga actually said the fire apparently started near some cattle sheds. He mentioned that while it did surround the village itself, the cordon they put up around the village is now controlled. And he pointed out one bit of, well, luck, as he put it. It's mostly burning low scrub and meadows, which is generally more manageable to fight than dense forest.
Still sounds incredibly challenging, though.
Yeah.
What are the conditions like in Avila?
Still very tough. Winds around 26 kilometers per hour, but with gusts up to 47. Temperatures at 33 Celsius, and again, very low humidity, 13%. The regional government, the junta, they've asked drivers to stay clear of nearby roads, obviously to help the firefighting efforts. Their main priority is protecting the nearby towns, places like Burgojondo, Navaluenga itself, Navalmoral, Sano de la Nava. And the mayor of Burgojondo did confirm the fire reached the edge of their town quite quickly, but thankfully, it's now controlled there with no major damage reported yet.
It's just incredible, isn't it? The scale of these events, the coordination needed, the sheer bravery involved in tackling them. It feels like this relentless battle every year where nature's power gets amplified by these shifting weather patterns, turning beautiful parks into, well, battlegrounds.
Okay, so from the long burning embers of those political allegations and the literal flames across the landscape, let's pivot now. Let's turn to something surprisingly dynamic happening within Spain's economy. There's this really fascinating surge going on in the housing market.
Yes, the headline data here is genuinely quite striking. The number of mortgages signed on homes, it just skyrocketed, up 54.4% in May 2025 compared to May last year. That totals 42,274 contracts, which isn't just a small jump. It's actually the biggest increase they've seen since October 2024, the best May figure since 2022. And it marks 11 consecutive months now of year-on-year increases. It's quite a streak. 11 months straight. Okay, that's impressive. But it's probably worth putting that in perspective, right? We're still talking numbers that are a long way off the crazy peaks of Spain's housing bubble, back when they were seeing over 100,000 signings a month.
Oh, absolutely. Good point. We're nowhere near those kinds of levels, but the trend is definitely notable. And here's another really intriguing detail. The average amount of these mortgages also went up quite a bit, by 12.7% to 158,153. And that seems to be driven largely by rising house prices themselves, which, by the way, jumped 8.4% in 2024. That's a rate we haven't seen since way back in 2007.
Wait a second. Did you say the average mortgage amount, 158,153 in May 2025? That's the highest since February 2020, before the pandemic really hit. And you're saying it's even higher than average amount seen during the bubble years. That feels significant. What's going on there?
It is significant. It really suggests a market that's responding very strongly to the current interest rate environment, because the main driver, the core force behind this whole surge, it really seems to be falling interest rates, no doubt about it. The average interest rate for these new loans dropped to 2.91%. That's the lowest it's been since February 2023. And importantly, rates have now stayed below that 3% mark for 4 months running, after nearly 2 years of being above it. Just compare that to May 2024, when the average rate was 3.25%. That drop has clearly unlocked a lot of demand.
Okay, so falling rates are key. And what type of mortgages are people actually choosing? Is there a trend there?
Oh, absolutely. And this is where it gets really interesting, I think. There's an overwhelming preference for fixed-rate mortgages. We're talking 7 out of 10 new borrowers, that's 69.9%, choosing fixed rates. And they're doing this even though variable rates, currently around 2.78%, are actually slightly lower than the average fixed rate, which is about 2.97%. Both are below 3%, but people are still flocking to fixed.
So even with variable rates being a tiny bit cheaper right now, people are overwhelmingly locking in fixed rates. What does that tell us about maybe buyer sentiment or psychology?
I think it tells us a lot. It's really a fascinating insight into how buyers are thinking, probably driven by recent history, right? The really striking takeaway from this whole mortgage boom isn't just the sheer number of deals being done. It's the very clear message Spanish home buyers seem to be sending. Interest rate stability is absolutely paramount for them. This massive shift towards fixed rates, even when variables are technically cheaper, it suggests a collective memory of past economic volatility and a really strong desire to lock in some certainty, some predictability, especially in what feels like a pretty unpredictable global economy right now.
That makes sense. And what about people renegotiating existing mortgages? Are lower rates encouraging a lot of that?
Well, you'd think so with the European Central Bank cutting rates. It definitely encourages people to look into it. But interestingly, the actual number of modified contracts, people renegotiating, it actually decreased by 15.4% year over year in May. Still, over 11,000 contracts were modified, 11,258 to be exact. And the most popular way to do it was novation, basically. Tweaking the terms but staying with the same bank. That accounted for almost 9,000 of them. Other methods like subrogations, where you actually change the title holder or switch banks entirely, those were less common but still happening.
Okay, interesting nuance there. And just to round out the picture, geographically,
Yeah.
was this surge happening everywhere in Spain?
Pretty much, yeah. All the autonomous communities saw increases in mortgage signings, but some regions really stood out. Galicia saw a massive surge, up 116%. La Rioja was up 100%, basically doubled. Cantabria saw a 92.8% increase. Even regions with more modest increases still saw significant growth, like Catalonia, which was up nearly 31%. So it was widespread. So putting this piece into the bigger picture of the Spanish economy, what does it all mean? And maybe more importantly for you listening, if you're perhaps considering buying a home in Spain or maybe refinancing, what are the implications? It certainly suggests a market that's found, well, renewed energy, driven by these more accessible interest rates. And as we discussed, that very strong desire among buyers for long-term financial predictability.
Right, bringing it all together then. Today, we've really dug into quite a range of topics, from those ongoing revelations of the Montoro investigation, the complex allegations of legislative influence, then shifting to the huge resilience, but also the immense challenges involved in battling those wildfires across Spain, and finally exploring this really dynamic, clearly rate-driven shift happening right now in the Spanish mortgage market.
Yeah, and I think it shows how crucial it is to look beyond just the surface headlines, doesn't it? Understanding these more intricate details, the context, it really does offer a much clearer, more comprehensive view of what's actually going on in Spain. And you see the connections to economic policy influencing housing, climate change impacting daily life and safety. It all shapes the reality for millions of people.
Absolutely. And maybe just one final provocative thought for you, the listener, to chew on. Given that incredibly clear preference we saw for fixed-rate mortgages in Spain, even when variable rates are slightly lower, and thinking about the lessons learned from past housing market booms and busts, what does that widespread choice really tell us about the public's confidence, or perhaps their lack of confidence in the future stability of interest rates, and maybe even the broader economy? Definitely something worth mulling over. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into the latest from Spain. We really appreciate you tuning in. We'll be back soon with more.